Now, while the mock exams, or of course in some areas they're known as the pre's, are for practice, many students find them at least as stressful as the actual state exams. This can be due to the fact they usually take place in January or February, a time of the school year when perhaps students tend to feel ill-prepared. Another cause of stress is that the students receive the results of their mocks in front of their friends as opposed to in the summer and online for the state exams. So lots of reasons why the child may worry. And how can you best support your child as they face into their mock exams? Well, the man who's best placed to give us advice on that is not me, particularly when I think of my own mocks. It is Dan Sheedy, the Newmarket and Fergus native and principal of thetuitioncentre.ie, who's in studio with me. Dan, a very good morning to you. Good to see you again.
Hi Alan, nice to be back.
So look, the mocks, it's obviously, I've stated there, very, very important, but it can be a cause of stress. And in your viewpoint, would it be correct to say that in some cases it can cause even more stress than the actual state exams? Because I suppose it's your first real experience of what that's going to be like.
It is, yeah. I think like most things in education, it's kind of multifaceted. You know, I as a teacher for a long time, I thought I had everything nailed about exams and leaving cert, and then as a parent my eyes were really open to what happens in an exam year. My daughter did leaving cert last year and my son did the junior cycle last year, and it was kind of more the experience as a parent than as a teacher that opened my eyes to the stresses to the company. Of course the whole year is very stressful, particularly the leaving cert year, but I was kind of not amazed, but I was surprised by the stress that accompanies the mocks. And I suppose like it's 2026 now, you know, January 2026, and these guys are preparing for Leaving Cert 2026, so they're in the year of the Leaving Cert, you know. Yeah,
the finish line is in sight. And that point as well, Dan, about the fact that it is January, February. If you are somebody who has been studying fairly regularly, perhaps, you know, with the best will in the world, it's hard to do things over the Christmas period. It's so many distractions. And if you are someone who hasn't done a tap, you've just come the other side of Christmas, and as you say, you can see the final few furlongs, and it's just a timely reminder that you could potentially be in deep trouble if you don't pull the finger out.
Well, yeah, reality bites. You know,
yeah, reality bites.
I think we all have that little down feeling when we come back to work in January. Let's be honest about it. And at least most of us, we're going into a job where we're comfortable. We know what we're doing. Most of us, you know. Whereas the students coming in,
yourself.
Gee, I was going to say about myself. Whereas the students come in and they have that natural January low. They know it's a massive 5 or 6 months for them, and then straight away they're told, oh, by the way, in about 3 or 4 weeks you've got a full set of exams to do. So, like, God bless them. You know, it's so stressful. And you touched on it very well in your introduction there, actually, that there's two elements to the stress, it seems. There's the academic element to the stress, whereby, like, you know, I always say kids are smart. Kids know exactly what to do, when to do, how to do it, and they know that they're not fully prepared for these exams. I mean, God bless, there isn't a teacher in the world could get the course covered by January in sixth year. So the course isn't covered, and yet the exam is based on the entire course. It's not like they say, well, we're not going to count anything you do after your mocks for the month. The exam is the same as the Leaving Cert. You know, I set mock papers for years myself, so you have to set a mock paper as if it's the Leaving Cert paper. So they're not fully prepared in terms of the course not being covered. They've had zero time for revision, because I hope they were out enjoying themselves over Christmas. Lord knows they deserve it, you know. And that's the academic side of it. And therefore what they know, Alan, is they know that if I'm going for physiotherapy, or if I'm going for radiography, or if I'm going to be a teacher, there's a certain number of points that they know they have to achieve in the Leaving Cert. And what students will do, no matter how much you try and tell them they shouldn't, is they'll tally up their points after their mocks, and they'll use that as a barometer for, am I close to my goal? And that they really shouldn't, because my experience as a teacher, most students will go up 10-15% from whatever they get in geography or maths or English in the mocks to Leaving Cert, because they'll have that time for revision, they'll have the course covered.
And that point, you know, if you tot up your points, and if you see that you're 10, 15, 20, 30 points or whatever off the course you've set your heart on, you know that might focus the mind. Just with a little bit more application between now and May, June, I can reach that point. But if you were someone, Dan, who realises you're 100 or 200 points off your course, is there a temptation, or is there a fear that those students might just go, God, it's January, February now, I'm this far off, I'll just give up the ghost? What is the point? Because 3-4 months is not going to save me from the hole I've dug for myself.
Well, you know, you'd be surprised.
Or is there still time?
Yeah, you'd be surprised. I have seen students go 100 points up from mocks to Leaving Cert. I literally, before I come on air, I was just looking at some emails and with some reviews, and it was a student who'd been in a maths thing we were on once, and they said, I couldn't believe I went from a H4 in my mocks to H1 in maths. So, like, it does happen. Absolutely, it does happen. And yeah, I would be saying definitely, if you're 100 points off, definitely don't give up. I mean, believe it or not, that's very attainable. I'll tell you why as well. The mocks don't include all the project work, the orals. So like in Irish, 40% is the oral. Geography, history, ag science, applied maths, engineering, technology, construction, all of project work were 20%, and everyone does well in the project work. And most people, despite the trepidation over it, do well in the orals. And all of that's going to count in the Leaving Cert. So if you lob that in with the fact that you'll have the course done, you'll have revision done, and because we've been down on the mocks a little bit, you'll have the mocks done, and therefore you'll have made all the mistakes of timing that you're going to make. I think, you can really shoot up. It's amazing.
Just to mention again, if you have any questions for Dan in relation to the mock exams and how to support your child or help them, or advice that you can pass on to them, and even if you've gotten it from Dan, you can claim it's your own. 086 1800 964. So look, one of the things you say down to students is just accept you can't revise everything. So be it the student who realises they're only a little bit off where they need to be, and those who are quite a bit off, although as you say you've seen students make big jumps. How do they approach that? I can't revise everything. What kind of mindset shift is needed for reducing stress and improving performance, and deciding what you need to focus on and what you need to leave by
That's a great
side?
question, Alan. Great question. Kind of down to the brass tacks of it now. I suppose now we have been talking to parents. Now we're talking to students a little bit. So what I would say to students is, you got to approach the mocks as the beginning of your revision for the Leaving Cert. Like I used to always say to my students, well, lads, would you be revising in January now if you didn't have mocks? And let's be honest about it, they probably wouldn't be. Particularly the lads, they tend to put it off. Girls are a bit more diligent. So what I would say to them is, if you let's say hypothetically you've a course, let's say geography, just because it was my own one, and there might be 25 topics for the Leaving Cert you have to study, and you've broken into those 25. Well, you pick 10 for the mocks. You pick 10. Now, use your teacher. Teachers aren't the big, bold people who don't want to help you. Teachers want to help, and they'll help you narrow down. They're not going to tell you what's on the mocks. But if you say, look, I just want to focus on 10, 11 topics, and then the mentality has to be amongst the student, right, I'm going to focus on these 10, and I'm then going to be mature enough that even if all of them don't come up in the mocks, I'm happy not getting the high grade in the mocks, because after the mocks, when I look back, I'll say, right, I've 10 of the 25 topics fully done for my Leaving Cert revised. Now I'm looking forward for months. I've only 15 to do.
And is that where the past papers can really show their worth? Because when you pick those 10 topics, base that 10 on looking at the previous form guide of what 10 or what were the most common ones that came up. The same ones don't come up every year, but if you look back over quite a number of past papers, you can make an educated guess as to what your best place to revise and study.
Absolutely, 100%. And there's a caveat here that we'll come to in a second, which is the danger of something like that. But your way of explaining it and stating it is perfect. Every subject has patterns. Again, I kind of go back to geography because I taught it for so long. Anyone out there doing geography, that in the mocks and in the Leaving Cert, you're going to get one of a landform of erosion or landform of deposition. Everyone knows that's going to come up. And for every subject, it's not that you're saying, I know which question is going to come up, but there are ones that do come up regularly. So as you said, if you're triaging those 25 topics and you're trying to say, which 10 will I learn? Past papers, 100%, you look into them and say, yeah, I would avoid one thing, which is saying just because something came up last year, that means it won't come up this year. That's not the case. Stuff does repeat, 2 years in a row on certain exams. But I would say 100%, I'm going to triage my topics, and rather than just guessing 10, exactly as you said, Alan, you should be doing it yourself. Go to the exam papers, go to your teacher, they're the best 10 to revise, and then have the maturity to say, if they don't come up, it's not the end of the world, it's only the mocks. Now, the caveat I will put in with that, and it's probably something we'll chat about closer to the Leaving Cert, is there's been a bit of a growth in recent years, particularly in TikTok and to a slightly lesser extent on Instagram, about kind of so-called experts who will come on TikTok and promise students the world. I've got the inside track. I know what's coming up. Sorry to break it out there, lads. Nobody knows the inside track.
That's why we have Dan on and not these chancers on TikTok.
But I think they do prey on the vulnerability of students a little bit. Kids are really vulnerable as it comes to exam times, and for someone to come out and say, guys, this is definitely coming up. I'm teaching 25 years. I do not know what's definitely coming up. I can do what you said, educated suggestions, but
more than likely.
But what happened is, and I always say to students, if I say to you in class, guys, that I think something is coming up, you don't hear, I think that's coming up. You hear, that's definitely coming up. And then that's all you revise. And so we just need to be really, really careful. Students out there, guys, just be really careful. Let's not put all our eggs in one basket. Do the revision, do the hard work. Everything in life worth having, involves a bit of hard work.
It's natural enough, Dan, as well, that students who get their mock results will compare their grades with friends. I just wonder how beneficial or otherwise that really is, because you might, even if it's a close friend, you're not with them every minute of the day. You're not with them when they're at home all the time. You don't know how much or how little work they've put in. Their experience is different to yours. Comparing your grade with their grade may put you into a deep funk when you don't need to be that downhearted, or you might be elated when you compare it with a friend, and an element of complacency could set in.
Absolutely. I can't remember who said it, but the phrase comparisons are odious comes to mind. And if you'll permit me, I had a conversation with someone recently which really addressed this, which was a colleague of mine, and they said when they were doing their Leaving Cert, there was a best friend in class. Best friend was getting H1s, 100%. We used to call them A1s or A's, Alan.
I know, I have to get my head around these H's and whatever else.
But the friend was getting these top grades, and my colleague said, I used to look at her thinking, gosh, she's got it so easy, you know. And she said 4 or 5 years later, I met that girl in college. And I said to her, God, you had it so easy in secondary school, you were getting all those great grades. And she turned and said, no, I had to work every night for hours and hours and hours to get those. And then my friend said, well, looking back, I'm glad I wasn't getting those grades because I enjoyed my sport in the evenings. You know, I enjoyed having a life socially. I'm not prepared to do 5-6 hours study a night. So you never know what's going on in someone else's life. You never know what's happening in terms of their grades or what they want, or even their home life and everything. So like you gotta do the best for you. And at the end of the process, what's going to happen is you're going to have a certain number of points in your hand, and they're yours. And it doesn't matter if they're 500 or 300. You know what? You earned them. And they're yours. And, you know, you can do anything with those points nowadays. There's so many pathways. So it doesn't matter if your friend's getting 550 and going to have to do medicine. You take your points that you've earned through your own hard work, and Lord knows you will find a lovely career path.
Cramming, and particularly late night cramming, that's going to be, I'm sure some students will engage in that. And it is very tempting, but it is ultimately... it'll have a negative impact. From your experience, Dan, how does sleep really affect exam performance?
Well, sleep and everything. I mean, I remember my daughter trying to convince me that she studied better in her room with the AirPods on listening to Taylor Swift. And, you know, I'm sorry, love, that's not going to wash. And students will try and convince themselves that something is easier to study because they enjoy doing it. But sleep, I would have to say, as you approach the actual exams, you know, study is a year-round thing. You know, so you got to have good study habits, take out the AirPods and stuff. But as you approach exams, as you said correctly, the tendency is, oh my God, the more hours study I do, the better I'll do. So therefore, if I stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning, the logic is I'll do a better exam. And it's 100% not true.
And Dan, is that just ultimately performative, that, you know, the next morning they're trying to think back and, God, I didn't take in a lot of that, but they nearly feel better because they went through the motions of cramming, even if nothing was staying in their head, and they feel like they're doing their part.
Well, I think it actually...
Even if it's not working.
Yeah, I think it comes back to what you said a minute ago. I think if they feel some of their friends are doing it, they feel they have to do it. But like, you know, a tired mind creates problems and a rested mind solves ones. So if your mind is tired going into that exam, you're actually going to make the exam harder for yourself. I used to always have a rule for Leaving Certs. 9 o'clock at night, guys, that's the cut-off point. Literally, every hour study you do after 9 o'clock, you're probably going down 3 to 4% in the exam. Because like, none of us are good when we're tired. I mean, if I come into work and I'm tired, I'm not going to perform very well. You know, if you came into work, Alan, and you were tired and your all words were tumbling out of your mouth, you know, you wouldn't perform as good. So we all need our rest. Students need their rest. And I would say 9 o'clock, guys. That's the cutoff. Do not study after 9 o'clock at night.
In terms of parents then, just to finish, Dan, what advice would you give them in terms of supporting their child? And it's always that age-old argument over, you know, the fine line between being super standoffish and then the shadow lurking over them, and that how the parent approaches that will depend on whether their child has been slacking off, or, like you mentioned, that girl who was doing hours and hours every evening. How can parents best support their child as they face into these exams, and then ultimately the junior Leaving Cert itself?
Yeah, I think, you know, what's the helicopter parent? Is that the old phrase?
Yeah.
But, well, I can't speak as a teacher. I'm going to speak as a parent here. And my advice to all the parents there is largely, lads, back off. I mean, kids are smart. They know they should be studying. They know when they should be working. If your child, kind of more seriously, if your child is completely not working and has no interest in studying at all, there's no value in getting frustrated or saying you should be studying, because there's a reason why a child won't want to study. Maybe the career path they've chosen in their head isn't a Leaving Cert isn't a requirement for that. Maybe, as I've often found, that a lot of kids don't want to try their best, because if they really try their best and then they don't do well, they only have themselves to blame. So there's always a deeper issue, so parents, you have to study, you should be studying. I would try and get a bit deeper than that, to be fair, because every child I've ever known through 25 years of teaching, they want to do well. So I found the best thing as a parent is when you pick them up, do you want to go for a chicken fillet roll, bring them home to a warm house, ask them how they got on. Is there anything you can do? Of course, if they want to go and do extra study, if they want to do an extra grind or something, you put the scaffolding around them for that. But I found with my two kids, back away, ask them, are they okay? Is there anything I can do for you? Would you like me to do anything here, there, everywhere? And if they're not working, trying to force them to won't help. It's better to try and ask them, is there a reason why?
Dan, it's amazing how uttering those three words, chicken fillet roll, has kicked off Pavlov dog syndrome. My mouth just started to water there. You've solidified in my mind what I'm going to have for my lunch, and that's ultimately my takeaway from this chat. Hopefully the parents out there listening to the show and the students as well got invaluable advice. Always good to chat to you. Dan, thank you very much.
Real pleasure.
For joining us in studio there. Dan Sheedy, the Newmarket and Fergus native, culinary expert and principal of thetuitioncentre.ie. And indeed, you can check out my in-profile conversation with Dan, which is up there on the in-profile section of our website, clare.fm.